Hey fellas, Onus here, and welcome back to With a Y, and it's time for your Twitter discourse of the day. I'm going to ask you something that's going to sound very similar to the red pill versus blue pill, but only in like the colors that we're using, not really anything else. This guy, Tim Urban, his @ is wait but why, probably nothing. A few days ago, he tweeted a hypothetical scenario that has like since taken off on Twitter. Everyone in the world has to take a private vote by pressing a red or blue button, so nobody's gonna know what it is that you chose, and these are the consequences laid out. If more than 50% of people press the blue button, everyone survives. If less than 50% of people press the blue button, only people who pressed the red button survive. Which button would you press? And you should know that being the killer robot that I am, I happily chose blue. Everybody lives. The thing is, it was very funny how back and forth it was when it was originally going. Like, it was very split down the middle for a time. Like, you can even say Tim saying, blue voters hanging on by a thread currently. But with 100,000-ish votes in the final tally, the Blues won out by roughly 15 points. The numbers next to each other don't seem like a blowout, and a lot of people would think that it shouldn't be this close, that like, why wouldn't you pick blue? And I'm not gonna pretend to understand it all the way through, but the reasoning I hear people give a lot is that the red button is like the game theory correct answer, where it's like based off zero sums, where if you press the red button, you have, no matter what anybody else does, an 100% chance of surviving. Whereas if you press the blue button, you're risking your life on a lot of other people also pressing the blue button with you. Now, Tim Urban won in this poll, but he had like a limited sample size. And so fucking MrBeast, seeing this tweet on his timeline, decided, wow, that's a really great contraption to try and put some people inside of. So he decided to go ahead and do his own version of the test. The same exact wording and everything, but he just put "be honest" in all caps at the end. We had a total of 300,000 votes this time, and blue won again with a similar margin of victory, though a few points less than in Tim's original post. You immediately had people taking sides in this camp, depicting one side as like the crying Wojak or whatever the yell you have you, and the other side, the one they're presumably on, as the Chad. Anyone who chooses blue has it coming. Save yourself. The odds are clear. Don't you know game theory? I love that show. Matt Pett's awesome. Fools care about others. I'll take the lifeboat. Why aren't you considering that your own life is all that matters? Only red voters matter. There's no reason to hope for anything other than survival for the sacred self. Think about other human lives like variables in a math equation. Nobody needs to die. And like, that's like a simplification. A lot of this is for fun, but this is like kind of how I see it, at least in my head. The best possible outcome of all of this is that everybody lives. There are two scenarios here where we can get to that. The first one has no personal risk to yourself, but it requires you and everybody else in the world to press the red button. Therefore, since nobody voted blue, there is no one on that side who has to die. The other option is that a majority of people, even if it's a slim one, have to pick blue. There are two routes to the best possible option in my eyes, and the one that requires a lower threshold to be met does have more personal risk to you though. I think it's more likely that a majority of people will pick blue than it is for everybody to press red. Now, the argument I see a lot of red voters going with is that the logical choice is to press red in that your choice exists in a vacuum. Everybody should logically come to the conclusion that red is the correct choice, and that's why everybody should vote for it. But I think we all know that's a statistical impossibility. So you're already like ensuring your survival, knowing that if most people act as you expect them to, some people will die as a result. Like, if we're putting this to every human on Earth, then there is like some dumb little kid who's gonna press blue because it's his favorite color. Here's the blue voters getting talked down to. We saved each other! And they all have like dent heads and have to wear helmets or have like a hamster in its wheel for a brain. And like, what are we talking about? I'm convinced blue pushers are a death cult. I mean, if we're going for ideal outcomes here, which is how I'm thinking about this, the way to get everybody to live that's easier to achieve is if a majority of people press the blue button. Now, given we're talking Twitter polls here, so it's not exactly like representative of what a real world scenario might play out like. Maybe people who say they will use the blue button wouldn't actually do that in real life. Hell, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe in my darkest moment I find out that I'm selfish and only like want to live at the expense of everybody else. But like, blue did win most times, but you know, at the end of the day, you can't really predict how anybody across the board would work. It is kind of funny that people are depicting it as like a bell curve thing, where dummies at the lower end of the bell curve would vote blue just cause like they see the question on its face and don't think very hard about it. Guys in the middle who think about it a little bit like would press red to ensure their own survival. Like, in this scenario, at least they know they will make it out alive no matter who wins. But then the blue guys at the end have supposedly measured out the probabilities here and would vote vote blue, but there's a quote tweet on this shit that was so fucking funny. The speech bubble is doing some good subtle work here. Guys on the furthest end of the curve are LARPing about that they would press the blue button, and then the day after, everybody left on the bell curve is a red voter. I do like this scenario taken completely out of like the moral argument around it all, instead just turned into bits for a joke. I ran the red and blue button experiment at home, and my 5-year-old son chose the blue button because that's, quote, his favorite color. What a dumbass. Obviously, my wife and I chose red right after. Maybe you should use your noggin next time, Logan. Thank you, Keegan. Now, there was no shortage of people trying to reframe the question into something that, like, you know, on its face seems to have the same stakes on the whole thing, but they changed the method. It's not just like a button you're pushing and then everything's tallied at the end. They'll take it into like a real-world what if. Like Summoning Salt said, a train is coming down a track, it always loops back to the trolley problem, man. That is the issue with this sort of thing. Everyone on Earth has the choice to either tie themselves to the track or not. If more than 50% of people chose to tie themselves to the track, the train turns around and doesn't run them over. Yes or no, do you tie yourself to the track? And like, it's not fundamentally different, but the context you're asking people to make this decision in is like a lot different. Like, the decision to not tie yourself to train tracks is different than like a button press. Like, the level of commitment you're asking for makes you think about the problem differently. There's a mostly funny diagram I saw about this shit. It's happening again where the red voter says, dude, get out of the crusher, and then the blue people under the crusher say, y'all just want to kill us. But unfortunately for you, I have discovered a stick figure interpretation that supports my view of the issue. Red voters try so desperately to act like A, pushing red is the default and pushing blue is a needless choice, and B, that pushing red has no correlation at all to the possible death of blues. Like, when we're going back to the train track scenario, I feel like the default state is that you are not tied to the train tracks. Like, you're choosing to actively change the state that you're in, whereas the red versus blue thing is you have to make a private decision between two options that you have not been presented with, like, before the scenario is right in front of you. Like, you are not tied to train tracks right now. If you were actively making the choice to tie yourself to train tracks, because the scenario concocted has abstracted the red versus blue button so far away from, like, the actual thing you're put in front of you. From Noroka Nyovel, this is, like, my view of the situation. I appreciate them giving me an opinion to claim as my own. The red versus blue thing is more of, like, a scale. Dude, the spikes are gonna kill us. Hop on this side. Lol, there's no spikes on this side. Why would I get on the side with spikes? You know, that's actually pretty close to the train one, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think my logic's falling apart here, man. Holy fuck, what would I do if I was told that I had to tie myself to train tracks to save everybody? Oh god! The truth is, I would hope that everybody presses red, that way at least a large chunk of humans would die, because I intend to do that myself anyways, big killer robot and all that. This was a little more of a fun thought experiment than, like, something super serious that I think some certain individuals might be taking it. Like, the logic of picking red does on some level make sense to me. You just might, like, side-eye him if blue ends up winning and you find out, like, a homie of yours pressed red. It's all made up, though, so I wouldn't stress too hard about it. That's all I got. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at @withany. That email's in the description if you guys want to send me any video topics. Anyways, piss off.